Here and in tonight, we know that we are drawing ever so much closer to additional warfare expansion, dare I say, even world war level expansion. We know the issues happening in South America as we speak. But now we're about to see the devastating reality about what's happening in West Asia. And the fact that the saber rattling between the United States in conjunction with Israel against Turkey is becoming feverishly dangerous at this point. And so I came across this very interesting tutorial video to kind of capture more or less what we're dealing with in this instance, why this is so significant, and why the Greater Israel Project is ultimately how we've been led to this point.
And on land, they are also not too far. Look here, it is Syria. Turkey and Israel are rapidly growing their military influence in Syria. Turkey maintains a large military presence in northern Syria, while Israel present in parts of southern Syria. In recent months, tensions between the two are rapidly increasing.
This is the final warning for you.
Turkey is threatening Israel for its actions, and Israel is calling Turkey a second Iran. But in reality, Israel fears Turkey even more than Iran. Well, Turkey is much more powerful than Iran. It's NATO's member and even has NATO's second largest army after the United States.
Now, one of the more interesting developments that's happening right now, nothing is official, but it's something to keep in mind. The United States and Trump's infinite wisdom are strongly contemplating leaving NATO. Now, one would ask themselves, why would they leave NATO? What would be the motivation at this point for the US to leave NATO? The cover story has been that the United States is frustrated with a large portion of nations, particularly in Europe, that will not engage in warfare against Iran on behalf of Israel and the US. So that's what they're saying. That's not necessarily the reason. The real reason, which I'm being told, is because Turkey is in NATO. And Israel cannot attack a country in NATO without the US responding. So the US is planning to leave NATO so that Turkey can be attacked by Israel. That's what we're being sold. I'll believe it when I see it. But if it does happen, to me, that would be the primary reason.
It controls the Bosphorus Strait and has access to both the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea.
Now, listen to this part one more time. Very important here. Remember, everything always gets back to economics.
And even has NATO's second largest army after the United States. It controls the Bosphorus Strait.
And there it is. What the US and Israel are discovering right now is that the Strait of Hormuz, which covers about, I guess, 20 to 25% of the oil trafficking that goes on. But the Bosphorus Strait, I don't know the exact percentage. Maybe somebody in the chat can let us know. That in itself is a major development. Now Israel is getting closed off from all directions. If there is a major reason why there would be any type of combat engagement between Israel and Turkey. Remember, Turkey always plays both sides. They've managed to stay out of the fray for a very long time. But now it looks like they're not going to be able to stay out of it anymore. Now it looks like they're getting reeled in. Erdogan has been expressing his thoughts regarding Netanyahu as a war criminal. That doesn't go over very well, and we'll get to Netanyahu in a minute. But this is, again, another great example of what ultimately ends up happening when the water becomes even safer for others to get into when the Israel question is on the table. At the beginning, it wasn't a safe question to ask. Most people may have had a very strong opinion about them, but they were not willing in any way to get involved in the middle of this. If Turkey gets involved, that could be lights out for Israel. How are they going to fight against how are they going to fight a two-front against Turkey and Iran unless the US is planning on getting involved. Could you imagine, in light of everything that we've experienced to this moment that we're in right now, could you even imagine the prospect of the US military going to war on behalf of Israel? I mean, like I said, every day brings us a step closer to an actual revolution. And situations like this is how it happens. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, everything is always based on money and power. If another economic strait, which is the Bosphorus Strait in the western part of Turkey, if that's closed off for economic usage between the US and Israel, what do you expect is going to happen? Jen likes to say that if everything you have is a hammer, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And if all we have is a military, well, everything looks like a warfare opportunity, and this could be it. But Turkey, this is maybe the most powerful military on earth besides ours. I go back and forth between where I think World War III is going to start. I still think it's very possible it could happen in South America. But if you get Turkey involved militarily, there's no coming back. There won't be this soft fight. Istanbul sits basically in the crux of everything economically in the world. Or as some people have been saying, Constantinople, which is what it originally was, and maybe in many people's eyes still is. There's a little bit more here.
And has access to both the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Unlike Iran, Turkey has one of the strongest navies in the region too, with submarines, frigates, and even an aircraft carrier, which can easily block Israel's maritime route. Turkey also produces its own state-of-the-art drones like Bayraktar TB2 and Akinci. Just days ago, Turkey signed a new joint defense agreement with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which says that an attack on one means an attack on all, and all three have to respect.
Now, why is this important? A couple of reasons. Pakistan is nuclear capable, and Saudi Arabia is getting absolutely decimated by Iran. So it's one big chessboard, and there's no telling how these pieces are going to fall. But one domino begets another domino. And all the while in the middle, you have Israel, and they're being led by absolute psychopaths. Netanyahu has his opinion about Erdogan and Turkey, as if he hasn't saber-rattled enough. But remember, Turkey does not want any part of the Greater Israel Project. They protect Syria. And Syria is as significant of a landmass that Israel desires on their border expansion.
don't.
המסר עבר?
המסר עבר, אבל אנחנו לא נסבול התבססות צבאית טורקית שיורדת דרומה, כי היא מאיימת עלינו. את זה העברנו באופן כללי. עכשיו אנחנו...
The thing I always find interesting when they speak, or when this devil speaks, he speaks in terms as if the Israeli army, the Israeli military, is all world, is benevolent, and can do whatever it wants. No. In reality, what he's doing is being a mouthpiece for the United States. That's even worse. He talks in terms of how business will be conducted. Israel and Turkey, is there really any comparison militarily between the two nations? Not really. But you add the United States into the equation, well, then you do have something to talk about. And that is why when Netanyahu is speaking, I often wonder, is he really speaking on behalf of the U.S. State Department? And oftentimes I don't see how he's not. And I would imagine at this point, most people would probably agree. His disposition is the United States is under our thumb because the people who truly own and operate the United States They're one of us. We're one and the same. That's going to be a direct connection to Van Jones and Larry Ellison, which we will get to shortly. But remember, they don't care. They have no concern whatsoever because in their mind, their people are the ones who aren't going to suffer. Ours are. That's why they gleefully speak in these terms. Oh, we're totally going to stop Erdogan and his people. Sure you are. Sure you are. Because unfortunately, we are a captured nation by the Zionist cause for now. Hopefully not for much longer. But for now, they're dictating the terms of the fate of our nation. He's got a little more to say.
ראינו שיש כוונה של טורקיה להתבסס בשדה תעופה דרומית לקו שלה, קרוב לחלב, והעברנו מסר. איך אגדיר לך את המסר? Don't.
המסר עבר?
המסר עבר, אבל כנראה שלא לא שמעו אותו, אז דאגנו שיבינו אותו בצורה יותר טובה.
When you start speaking in these terms, when you start saying things like, we made sure they understood it better, what exactly do you think he's referring to? They assume that if they attack, that we will be behind them. You know, I had a conversation with Jen earlier about the similarities in so many ways about the broken economic system that we have in this country when it comes to the highway, interstate highway system and NATO. The interstate highway system that was passed under the Eisenhower administration in 1953, I believe, or 54, somewhere around there. The toll plazas that we see in this country, every one of them was constructed specifically for the purpose of paying for the toll roads. That's it. Once they were paid for, they were supposed to be removed. But in the 1970s, even the 1960s, they figured out, oh, wait a minute. We don't have to get rid of these. This is a cash machine. We'll keep them. And no greater greed of that is in my home state of New Jersey. Do you know that the Port Authority in New York, New Jersey, do you know that only New Jersey makes you pay? New York doesn't. Very interesting. I didn't know that, but I learned it. I am from the Soprano state, after all. And how does this translate into NATO? Well, NATO was supposed to be a direct response to the Soviet Union and what effectively was the beginning of the Cold War in the late 1940s, particularly starting around 1949. And the Truman administration enacted NATO. And once the Soviet Union fell, that was supposed to be the end of NATO. But NATO, in its purest form, is ostensibly the military-industrial complex on a global scale. So the idea that Trump is now going to get the U.S. out of NATO in this moment, just for Israel to start a war with Turkey, we are not exactly being run by the most intelligent of individuals. We know that now. But I also believe there's a lot of people in positions of authority that do not care if the destruction and decimation of a substantial portion of the global population is taken out. Why would they care? This is exactly why no one gives a shit about what's going on in Gary, Indiana, and that's on the micro level. On the macro level, as you can see here, flippantly talking about attacking and antagonizing Erdogan and the Turkish people, that's not smart. It's not. And Erdogan is somebody who is kind of a shyster in many ways. He plays all sides. He has no real loyalty other than to the people of Turkey. But now what you're seeing is Israel is not going to stop in their pursuit of their Greater Israel project. And now it's directly affecting Turkey and their economic interests. So naturally, they have to respond, and they will. The big issue here is going to be, what are we going to do? What is the United States going to do? And what are we going to allow our compromised president and administration to do to us to satisfy this bloodlust that this Zionist ideology has over all of us. There is no question that as this story unfolds, and it's always interesting how they always seem to have these very interesting caveats drop on the weekends. They assume nobody's paying attention, but we are. Oh, we're paying attention, all right. And we know how dangerous this can get. So saber rattling with Turkey, not wise.